Joining me now, Issac Willour, contributor at Young Voices. Criticism and pushback off and on DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, or as I like to put it, the new form of racism and the very, very, very low bar of expectations, or the soft bigotry of no expectations because of the color of skin or some particular identification. Issac, welcome to the show.
Hey, David, thanks for having me.
Well, good to have you here, and let's dive right in. Push back on DEI initiatives in education and the private sector, and I like that your focus is on both because it's not one or the other.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right, David. I mean, so the point of this is that DEI doesn't serve any of the people that it claims to serve, right? So what DEI does is it looks for racial disparities and it seeks explanation for those disparities, which on its face is pretty innocuous, but it's what happens from there that ends up being a problem. On the business side in the private sector, you see businesses being asked to disclose unadjusted pay gaps based on race, which hurts businesses on the PR front, particularly on the academic side, and we can get into the Claudine Gay stuff if you'd like, or just what a wonderful cesspool that is. On the academic side of DEI, you see preferential treatment based on race and divisive racial rhetoric. And I'm just stuck here asking, at what point is this actually helping young Americans, especially young Americans of color, feel better about themselves and feel better about the country they live in? This is an all-out war on optimism that is being waged by the DEI lobby, and it's scary to watch.
Going to get into Claudine Gay, so let's start with her and then work our way from education into the corporate world. Let's start with her.
Yeah, let's start with her. So there is, as you know, there's this black alumni of Harvard Equity Initiative that is pushing the school for more DEI in the wake of the firing of Claudine Gay. And I mean, this group is, I mean, there's fantastic coverage of this over at the Washington Examiner. This is just a great group that's just like full of category errors. So what they do is they describe the attacks on ex-Harvard president Claudine Gay. They describe these attacks as racist and misogynist, and they ignore the fact that the exact same problem, when it happens to a non-black, non-woman like ex-USC Pres Robert Caslen, is not racist and misogynist. So I'm getting a crash course in their ability to accurately diagnose things, which is to say pretty much non-existent. But I mean, this is the unfortunate reality of the Claudine Gay situation. You see hints of this in the Fani Willis situation as well, is DEI is destroying actual meritocracy. It's throwing a wrench into all of that. And furthermore, it is diabolically pushing back on the idea that meritocracy is actually good, because when people like us push back and argue for meritocracy, we're told that we're racist or being blind to an epidemic of white supremacy or some such talking point. And I simply don't buy it. And I don't see it as an optimistic way to view life or a healthy way to view life at all.
Yeah, and let's talk a bit about what effect this has, and not even at the collegiate level, but prior to that, as young developing people, regardless of color of skin or whether they're male or female, they're being fed this as well. Our ability to reason as we grow is developing, and it's a bit onerous the way I see it, Issac, to give them these ideas when they're actually not able to fully formulate and look ahead.
This is true. And I mean, furthermore, you're also giving people, young people especially, a profoundly wrong-headed focus about how to approach life, how to approach academia, how to approach Western civilization. There's this great quote from W.E.B. Du Bois about reading Shakespeare as a young man, and obviously Du Bois lived in a very different time than either of us do, but he talked about he reads Shakespeare, and Shakespeare harbors no racial prejudice towards him, and reading Western classics creates that love of Western civilization that drove a great deal of his work, even if we don't agree with everything that he said. Those are the kind of things that we should be giving young Americans of color, a profound appreciation of Western an honest appreciation of Western civilization and its faults, but an honest understanding and gratitude for its greatness too. And that is something I don't see DEI advocates talking about. And I think they're being incentivized not to talk about that, and that's a big problem, because then it goes back to that initial question I asked: who exactly is this serving?
Yeah, who is it serving? And, you know, we've had enough time now to see if there would be any benefits to this long-term grift that's underway. But I'll tell you, I don't believe for 1 second that the DEI advocates, we'll call them that, are giving up. And I'll give you a case in point inside this very company at SiriusXM. Because their latest announcement, now that DEI is actually causing, frankly, in my view, in observation where I work, is that people never needed it, got along, worked, built their careers, and they weren't being blocked unless it was some other factor for the most part. But they've morphed. And this is what I see in corporations. In some cases, you do see DEI dying, the DIE. You have the state of Florida, and now we have one of the universities already getting rid of DEI positions. But the morphing of this into others. Now at SiriusXM, there is a new team, the Organizational Culture and Change Management team. They now have their listed individuals who will now report to the new head of this team. Some of the DEI staff have left SiriusXM, but they're still going, and there's still an opening for a leader of change management. These are amorphous terms and positions, but they're finding a way to keep DEI in the company under another name.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely what happens. And I mean, it's interesting, you know, Office of Change Management. It almost sounds like a certain president a couple of years ago who used words like hope and change to usher America into a brighter racial future, and then promptly didn't. But yeah, I mean, this is the question, and I've interviewed DEI practitioners before, and I've asked them these kinds of questions. It's like, do these kinds of programs make employees of color more happy? Do they give them greater agency? And also, worth pointing out, do they increase their feelings of goodwill and collaborative spirit with their coworkers, especially ones who are not racial minorities? Or do they pigeonhole us into talking about race all the time, including when we don't want to, and especially when we don't need to, and ask us to focus introspectively on immutable characteristics like race that aren't that interesting in a distraction from all the things we could actually be accomplishing together as a workplace, as a university, as a country? These things matter, and if DEI becomes a distraction to that, it's not serving anybody except the corporate lobby that pays to have it in place. It's profoundly wrong-headed.
Well, it's dangerous. I'll say that. Wrong-headed, It's flat-out dangerous. And in a very simple, call it view, not simplistic, but simple, clean, and clear. I work with people of all stripes. I'm in the biggest broadcaster in the world. We don't all agree. Some like each other, some get along, some tolerate each other. It's like any other dynamic. But there wasn't there wasn't a driving problem that was so obvious that it required DEI.
Yeah. No, this is right. And I mean, it's the question of what actually are workplaces for? Workplaces and businesses are to accomplish goals. They're to produce radio shows. They're to create products. In the case of the government, they're to pass legislation, allegedly, and, you know, these kinds of things. That's what businesses are for. Businesses are not supposed to be little microcosms where we test out all of our little social theories. And I want to go back to your point about being dangerous, because I do agree there. And I think the reason DEI is dangerous is not just because it's divisive, although it certainly can be that. But think about what are we telling? Like, I think about my future kids who are not going to be white. And I think about what they're going to be told, right? What are they going to be told about the color of their skin? What are they going to be told about the way in which their color of their skin dictates the content of their life? They're not going to be told optimistic things. They're going to be told profoundly depressing things. I worry that there is a well-intentioned but profoundly very bad at executing group of Americans who are going to tell my kids that focusing on race is the way to become a happier, healthier person and a better American. It doesn't. It profoundly depresses you. And also, race is kind of boring. That's the other thing. I'm not pushing to replace DEI with anything. I'm pushing to remove improper focus on race. And that's what we need to be about. And if you're at a company with DEI, you need to think about what exactly would you want to replace it with. And for a lot of people, the answer is probably nothing. It's just it's another office that doesn't need to exist because it's profoundly misfocused and misexecuted.
I like the way you write this in your article about your future children. When you write, we're not pushing back on DEI because of some deep-seated self-loathing or racial animus. We're pushing back on DEI because it represents skepticism about the American dream and the principles behind a society that's given us everything. And in my bumper sticker approach to it, DEI must D-I-E. It must die, not morph into something else, not be created under a new team with a new name that sounds, so amorphous. Organizational culture and change management. What is the change from that is so pervasive that requires a new change to?
Yeah, I want to go back to your point about the mentality question, David. I mean, let me put it this way. I was adopted from the third world, right? I was born in India. I didn't come from the third world to just have to grow up in America, the greatest country in the world. I didn't come all this way to have some ideologue tell my future son that he is profoundly disadvantaged because of the color of his skin when he's 13 years old. He has enough questions about who he is and how he relates to society. I don't need politically motivated activists compounding that. Come on now. It's not appropriate. It's not acceptable. And it's not going to help our kids. It's not going to help America as a whole become more united, more prosperous, more free. And if it's not doing any of those things, then we need to consider very seriously the possibility that it's doing the other three things, the reverse of those. And in that case, it must be discarded.
It pits people not necessarily even against each other. It creates an environment of trust or of distrust rather than trust in companies. People begin to wonder why some achieve or not. I mean, it creates all of these doubts, and that is one of the problems. The D in DEI is really about creating doubt between people, envy between people, and insecurity in companies. And in America, for that matter.
No, that's true. Yeah, I mean, think about it. I mean, obviously, you're a black man. I'm an Indian man. We think about the way that the perspective that we have on DEI, or the perspective that we have on race, is to give everybody the most respectful thing we possibly can, which is to treat them as equals and individuals and not representative of some made-up group. And we are now being told that that's not enough, that we are somehow the xenophobic ones for having that opinion. We're not. It's simply not true. It's a bunch of bull. And we have to stand up now, because if we don't, future generations are going to eat the cost of these profoundly depressing ideas. A lot of DEI people I talk to, their outlook on life is really depressing, especially when it comes to the future of America. I can't work with that. I was born in the third world. I can't work with that. How am I supposed to not have optimism right now? It's cramping my style. It's cramping your style. It's cramping free American style. It needs to go. It's not good.
DEI needs to die. Simple. To the point. Issac, great to have you here. Issac Willour, contributor at Young Voices. Great stuff. Read him on the Daily Wire. Just look him up, folks, at Issac Willour, at Willour on X. Great work. Keep it up.
Thank you so much, David. You have a great day. Take care. God bless.
God bless.